The coffee had gone cold in my hands. I stared at the brown liquid, watching a thin film form on its surface, aware that Marcus was watching me. The silence between us had stretched so long it felt like a physical thing, heavy and suffocating, pressing down on my chest until I could barely breathe. "Say something," he whispered. "Please, Jenna, say something." But what was there to say? What words existed in the entire English language that could respond to what he'd just told me? That after 3 years together, 3 years of late-night conversations and shared dreams of building a life piece by piece, of planning a future that now lay shattered at my feet, he no longer felt romantic love for me. I set the coffee cup down on our kitchen table, the same table we found at a flea market in Portland last summer. We'd been so excited about it, had haggled with the vendor together, laughing as we carried it 6 blocks to the rental truck. Marcus had wanted to sand it down and refinish it, but I'd loved the worn patina, the history etched into every scratch and stain. We'd compromised as we always did, touching up only the worst spots and leaving the character intact. Character, that's what I'd always thought our relationship had: depth, substance, the kind of love that wasn't just fireworks and passion but something steadier, something that could weather storms and grow stronger with time. I'd been wrong. When I finally asked, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears, when did it stop? Marcus ran his hands through his dark hair, a gesture I knew as well as my own reflection. I'd watched him do it 1,000 times, when he was stressed about work, when he was deep in thought, when he was trying to solve a problem. Now he was trying to solve the problem of me, of us, of how to explain the inexplicable. "I don't know exactly," he said, and at least he had the decency to sound miserable about it. "It wasn't sudden, it's been gradual, like a light dimming so slowly you don't notice until you're standing in darkness." The metaphor was apt, I'd give him that. Marcus had always been good with words. It was one of the things I'd loved about him from the beginning, the way he could articulate feelings and ideas that I struggled to express. Now he was using that gift to articulate the death of what we'd built together. How long, I pressed. "Weeks, months." He was quiet for a moment, and in that pause I knew the answer would hurt. "Maybe 6 months," he admitted. "Maybe longer." I kept thinking it was just a phase, that the feelings would come back. I thought maybe I was depressed or stressed, or that we just needed to reconnect. I tried, Jenna, I really tried. 6 months, half a year of my life spent loving someone who no longer loved me back, at least not in the way I needed. I thought back over the past months, trying to identify the signs I'd missed. Had he been more distant? Less affectionate? We'd gone on that camping trip in September. He'd seemed happy then, hadn't he? Or had I just seen what I wanted to see? "The camping trip," I said aloud. "You seemed happy." "I was happy," he said quickly. "I love spending time with you, Jenna. You're my best friend. That's what makes this so hard. I don't want to lose you from my life, but I can't keep pretending that what I feel is romantic love when it isn't." Best friend, the words that every person in a dying relationship dreads hearing. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. You're my best friend, but not my lover. As if friendship were somehow lesser, as if the deep knowledge and comfort we'd built together counted for nothing against the absence of butterflies and desire. I had to force the words out, "Did you meet someone else?" "No," his response was immediate and emphatic. "God, no, Jenna, this isn't about someone else, it's about me, about what I'm feeling or not feeling. I wouldn't do that to you." I wanted to believe him. Looking into his brown eyes, eyes I'd looked into countless times, in joy and sadness, in passion and in comfort, I thought I did believe him. But belief didn't make the pain any less sharp. "So what now?" I asked. "You just decided this tonight was the night to tell me, to blow up our entire life together." "I couldn't keep lying to you," he said, and now there were tears in his eyes too. "Every time you told me you loved me, every time you looked at me like I was your whole world, I felt like I was stealing something from you. You deserve someone who loves you the way you deserve to be loved, with their whole heart. I can't give you that anymore, and it's killing me to admit it, but pretending would be worse." The rational part of my brain, the part that wasn't drowning in shock and grief, recognized the integrity in what he was saying. He could have kept pretending, could have let us drift along in comfortable companionship, going through the motions of a relationship while his heart grew more distant. Many people did exactly that, staying in relationships out of habit or fear or simple inertia. But the rest of me, the part that was feeling and bleeding and breaking, wanted to scream at him. How dare he decide unilaterally what I deserved? How dare he give up on us without fighting, without trying therapy or taking a break or doing any of the 100 things couples do when they hit a rough patch? "Did you ever think," I said, my voice harder now, anger beginning to seep through the numbness, that maybe this is just what long-term love looks like, that the butterflies and the constant passion fade and what you're left with is something deeper, that maybe you're just confusing the end of the honeymoon phase with the end of love itself. I could see from his face that he'd considered this. I thought about that, he admitted. I read articles, talked to my therapist. You talked to your therapist? The words came out sharp. You've been discussing our relationship with your therapist and never thought to mention it to me. I needed to figure out what I was feeling before I brought you into it, he said. I didn't want to hurt you unnecessarily if it turned out to be something I could work through on my own. Well, congratulations, I said bitterly. You've really figured it out now, haven't you? You've decided our relationship is over and I don't even get a say in it. That's not fair, Marcus said, and there was a flash of frustration in his eyes now. You think I wanted this? You think I'm happy about any of this? I've been agonizing over this for months, trying to understand my own feelings, trying to see if there was any way to fix it. But I can't manufacture feelings that aren't there, Jenna. I can't force myself to be in love with you no matter how much I wish I could. The truth of his words hit me like a physical blow. He was right, of course, you can't force love. You can't logic or wish or try your way into feeling something you don't feel, but that didn't make it hurt any less. I stood up from the table, needing to move, needing to put some physical distance between us. I walked to the window of our third-floor apartment, looking out at the city lights below. How many people out there were having similar conversations right now? How many relationships were ending while I stood here trying to process the end of mine? What made you realize, I asked, still facing the window, was there a specific moment when you knew? I heard him shift in his chair behind me. Last week, he said quietly, when you were talking about next year about looking at houses, maybe getting a dog, you were so excited, so full of plans, and I just felt nothing, no excitement, no anticipation. Just this heavy dread at the idea of being locked into a future I couldn't feel enthusiastic about. And I realized I couldn't keep letting you plan a life with someone who wasn't all in. Last week, we'd been sitting on this very couch, my laptop open between us, looking at real estate listings. I'd been scrolling through photos of houses with yards and extra bedrooms, talking about which neighborhoods had the best schools even though kids were still theoretical, still years away, pointing out houses with good bones that we could renovate together. Marcus had been quiet, I remembered now, but I'd attributed it to tiredness. He'd had a long day at work. How many other signs had I missed? How many times had I explained away his distance, his distraction, his lack of enthusiasm? Had I been willfully blind, or had he really been that good at hiding what he was feeling? I can't believe you let me go on and on about houses, I said, knowing you had no intention of buying one with me. I didn't know what to do, he said helplessly. I didn't want to ruin the moment and I was still trying to figure out how to tell you. I turned to face him. Were you ever going to tell me, or were you just going to string me along until I figured it out myself? Of course I was going to tell you, he said, that's what I'm doing now. 6 months late, I shot back. We stared at each other across the apartment, across the space that had been our home, across the wreckage of what we'd built together. I could see the guilt and pain on his face, but I couldn't comfort him. For once, I couldn't be the person who made him feel better. I need you to leave, I said suddenly. The words came from somewhere deep inside me, from a place of self-preservation I didn't know I had. I can't be around you right now. Jenna. Please, I said, and my voice broke on the word. Please just go to Mike's or to a hotel or wherever, but I need you to leave. I need to be alone. He stood up, hesitating. We need to talk about logistics, the apartment, the bills, our stuff. Not tonight, I said firmly. We'll figure it out later. Right now, I just need you gone. I could see him struggling with this, his natural instinct to talk things through warring with my clear need for space. Finally, he nodded. Okay, he said quietly. I'll grab some things and go to Mike's, but Jenna, I want you to know. Don't, I interrupted. Whatever you're about to say, just don't, not right now. He nodded again and walked toward our bedroom. I stayed by the window, listening to him move around, opening drawers, zipping up a bag. Each sound felt like another small death, another piece of our life together being dismantled. When he came back out, bag slung over his shoulder, he paused in the doorway. I'm so sorry, he said, for all of it. I didn't respond, didn't turn around. I heard the door open and close, heard his footsteps retreating down the hall, and then I was alone. The silence that followed was absolute. I stood there for a long time watching the city lights blur as tears finally came. I'd been so shocked earlier that I couldn't cry, but now the grief hit me in waves, each one threatening to pull me under. I slid down to the floor, my back against the wall, and let myself break. The next morning arrived with cruel indifference to my suffering. Sunlight streamed through the windows, birds sang outside, and somewhere in the building, I could hear a neighbor's cheerful humming as they went about their normal Sunday routine. The world hadn't ended, even though mine had. I'd spent most of the night on the floor by the window, eventually dragging myself to the couch where I dozed fitfully, waking every hour with a moment of disorientation before the memory of last night crashed back over me. Each time, I'd hoped it was a nightmare, that I'd wake up to find Marcus beside me and everything normal again. But the empty apartment and the sunlight mocking my misery confirmed the reality. Marcus no longer loved me, and everything I'd thought was solid and sure had crumbled overnight. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I'd ignored it last night, but now I picked it up to see 3 missed calls from my best friend Rachel and a string of texts. Marcus just texted Mike. "Are you okay? Call me when you can. I'm coming over." I checked the time, 9:47 a.m. Even as I looked at the screen, a new text appeared. "I'm outside your building, let me up or I'm bribing someone to let me in." Despite everything, I felt a small flicker of something that might have been gratitude. I texted back the building code and unlocked my apartment door, then collapsed back onto the couch. I must have looked as terrible as I felt because Rachel took one look at me when she came through the door and her expression crumpled. "Oh, honey," she said, dropping the grocery bags she was carrying and crossing to the couch. She wrapped me in a tight hug and I found myself crying again, great heaving sobs that shook my whole body. Rachel just held me, rocking slightly, murmuring the kinds of soothing nonsense words you'd say to a hurt child. When I finally pulled back, she grabbed tissues from the box on the coffee table and handed them to me. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. I recounted the entire conversation, from Marcus's initial confession to his departure. Rachel listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker as I spoke. 6 months, she said when I'd finished. He knew for 6 months and said nothing. He said he was trying to figure out his feelings, I said weakly. "That's bullshit," Rachel said flatly. "I'm sorry, I know you probably don't want to hear this right now, but that's absolute bullshit. You don't figure out your feelings for 6 months while your partner is planning a future with you. You have a conversation like an adult." He said he didn't want to hurt me unnecessarily. "And how did that work out?" Rachel interrupted. "Did keeping you in the dark for 6 months while he worked through his issues make this hurt less?" "No, it made it worse because now you have to look back at the past 6 months and question every moment, every interaction. That's not protecting you, Jenna, that's protecting himself." I hadn't thought about it that way, but Rachel was right. The past 6 months were now tainted, every happy memory now suspect. Had he meant it when he'd said he loved me on my birthday, when we'd stayed up all night talking after my promotion, when he'd held me while I cried about my grandmother's death? I defended him, I said quietly. Last night when I asked if he'd met someone else and he said no, I believed him. I thought at least he was being honest about that. "Maybe he was," Rachel said, "but that's like the bare minimum, Jenna. Congratulations, you didn't cheat isn't exactly a high bar." I laughed despite myself, a short, bitter sound. "I feel so stupid, how did I not see this coming?" "Because you trusted him," Rachel said. "Because when you love someone, you're not constantly looking for signs that they've stopped loving you back. That's not stupid, that's normal." She got up and went to the kitchen and I heard her rummaging around. She came back with 2 mugs of coffee, actual hot coffee, unlike my sad cold cup from last night, and handed me one. "I brought supplies," she said, gesturing to the grocery bags she'd dropped by the door. "Ice cream, those cookies you like, face masks, wine, and the ingredients for your grandma's soup recipe, also chocolate, lots of chocolate." "You didn't have to do that," I said, but I was touched. "Yes, I did," Rachel said firmly. "That's what best friends are for. Now what's the plan? Are you staying here?" The question brought up a whole host of issues I hadn't let myself think about yet. This apartment was ours, both our names on the lease. We'd moved in together a year ago, combining our furniture and our lives. Nearly everything in this space was entangled with him, purchased together, chosen together, loaded with memories. I don't know, I admitted. I can't think about that yet. That's okay, Rachel said. You don't have to figure it all out right now, but Jenna, you know you can stay with me and David if you need to, right? Guest room is yours for as long as you want it. Thank you, I said and meant it. I need to process all this first. We sat in silence for a while, drinking our coffee. Rachel didn't push, didn't try to fill the quiet with platitudes or advice. She just sat with me in my grief, and sometimes that was the most valuable thing a friend could offer. Can I ask you something? I finally said. Anything. Do you think he's right that you can just fall out of love, that feelings can die even when nothing's wrong? Rachel considered this carefully. I think feelings can change, she said slowly. I think relationships go through phases, and sometimes what you felt at the beginning evolves into something different. But I also think that in a good relationship, you make a choice to keep choosing your partner even when the feelings get complicated. Love isn't just a feeling, it's also a verb. It's something you do. So you think he gave up? I said. I think he stopped trying, Rachel said. And look, maybe there were legitimate reasons for that. Maybe you two weren't compatible in ways that became clearer over time. Maybe he's going through something that has nothing to do with you. But the fact is, he made a decision that his feelings not being what he wanted them to be was a reason to end things rather than a problem to work on together. I thought about what Marcus had said about not wanting to force feelings that weren't there. Was Rachel right that he'd given up too easily, or was I just desperately looking for a reason to believe this could have been fixed? I suggested couples therapy once, I said, remembering. About 4 months ago, things had felt a little off and I thought maybe we just needed help communicating better. He said we didn't need it, that we were fine. Rachel's eyes flashed with anger. He said you were fine while he was already checking out of the relationship. I guess so, I said miserably. God, Rachel. What if everything was a lie? What if he never really loved me the way I thought he did? Hey, no, Rachel said firmly, taking my hands. Don't go down that road. Whatever he's feeling now doesn't negate what you had. Those feelings were real when you felt them, when he felt them. You can't let his current confusion or unhappiness rewrite your entire history together. But could I really separate the past from the present? Could I look back at our happy moments and trust they were genuine when they'd led to this? My phone buzzed again, a text from Marcus. I hope you're okay. I know you need space, but I'm here when you're ready to talk about next steps. I care about you so much. I showed the text to Rachel, whose expression turned stony. He cares about you so much, she read aloud. Jesus Christ. What's wrong with that? I asked, even though something about the text had made my stomach turn. It's just so bloodless, Rachel said. He dumps you and then texts you like you're a colleague he's worried about. I care about you so much. What does that even mean? I knew what she meant. The text felt wrong, like he was already trying to reframe our relationship to make it something less than it had been. We weren't colleagues or casual friends. We'd been partners, lovers, people who'd built a life together. I care about you felt like an insult to what we'd shared. I didn't respond to the text. I wasn't ready to think about next steps or logistics or any of it. I was still trying to survive the present moment. You want to know the worst part? I said after a while. Tell me. I still love him, even knowing he doesn't feel the same way, even feeling angry and betrayed, I still love him. How pathetic is that? That's not pathetic, Rachel said gently. That's human. You don't just turn off 3 years of love overnight. Give yourself permission to still have feelings for him, even complicated ones. How long until it stops hurting? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. I don't know, Rachel admitted, but it will get easier. I promise you this won't feel this raw forever. I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't imagine a future where I didn't wake up every morning to this crushing weight on my chest. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of grief and numbness. I called in sick to work, something I almost never did, and spent most of my time alternating between crying and staring blankly at the walls. Rachel checked in constantly, bringing food and staying with me when she could. My other friends circled wagons too, offering support and company and distractions. But through it all, I kept coming back to the same questions. Why, when exactly did his feelings change? Was there something I could have done differently? Was there something wrong with me that made me unlovable? A week after that terrible conversation, Marcus texted asking if we could meet to talk about the apartment and other practical matters. I'd been dreading this but knew it had to happen eventually. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop neither of us usually frequented. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee in front of him. He'd ordered my usual oat milk latte with an extra shot. The familiar gesture made my throat tight. "Hi," he said as I sat down. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, his hair unkempt in a way that suggested genuine distress rather than stylish messiness. Part of me was glad he was suffering too, but it didn't make me feel any better. "Hi," I responded. We sat in awkward silence for a moment. 3 years together, thousands of conversations, and now we had nothing to say to each other. "How are you?" he finally asked. "How do you think I am?" I said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Sorry, I didn't come here to be hostile, let's just talk about what we need to talk about." He nodded, looking hurt but accepting. "Okay, the apartment first. The lease is up in 3 months. I think it makes sense for one of us to move out before then rather than being stuck together for that long." The clinical way he said it, stuck together, stung, but he was right. We couldn't live in that space together anymore. "I'll move out," I said. "I can't stay there anyway, too many memories." "Are you sure?" he asked. "I don't want to force you out of your home." "It's not my home anymore," I said flatly. "Not without you. Besides, Rachel and David have offered me their guest room until I find a new place." He looked relieved, which annoyed me. Had he hoped I'd be the one to volunteer to leave? "I'll cover your share of the rent for the remaining months," he said. "It's the least I can do." "I don't want your guilt money," I said. "I can pay my own rent." "It's not guilt money, it's being fair," he insisted. "You're the one having to move and start over. Let me do this one thing." We went back and forth a few more times before I finally, reluctantly, agreed. The truth was I couldn't really afford to pay rent on 2 places at once, but accepting his money felt like accepting defeat somehow. We talked through other logistics: furniture division, shared accounts to close, bills to split, mutual friends to navigate. It all felt so businesslike, so transactional. This was what our relationship had come to, a series of items to be divided and distributed. "What about the Portland table?" I asked and immediately regretted it. The question was too loaded, too emotional. Marcus looked at the table, then at me. "You should take it," he said. "You were right about leaving the character, it's perfect the way it is." Was he talking about the table or us? I couldn't tell, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "There's something else I need to tell you," Marcus said, and my stomach dropped. What else could there possibly be? "I'm going to start seeing a therapist," he said. "A different one, I mean, someone who can help me figure out why I have such a hard time with commitment and intimacy, why I seem to sabotage good relationships." "So you admit that's what happened?" I asked. "That you sabotaged us?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I have a pattern, Jenna. This isn't the first time I've ended a relationship because the feelings changed. I thought it was just bad matches before, but 3 years with you, everything we had, if I couldn't make it work with you, then the problem is me." I didn't know what to do with this information. Was I supposed to feel sorry for him? Was this some kind of attempt at making himself the victim in all this? "I hope therapy helps," I said, and I meant it, even though part of me wanted him to suffer. "I hope you figure out your issues before you do this to someone else." He winced. "I deserve that." "Yeah, you do," I said. We sat there for another moment, the silence heavy between us. "Can I ask you something?" I said finally. "Of course." Yeah. "Did you ever really love me? Not just think you did or want to, but actually, genuinely love me?" He met my eyes and I saw real pain in his face. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "God, yes, Jenna, I loved you so much. I still care about you more than almost anyone. That's what makes this so hard. The love didn't die, it just changed, transformed into something different, something that isn't romantic anymore." "That's not enough though, is it?" I said quietly. "Caring isn't enough, friendship isn't enough, not when I still want more." "No," he agreed, "it's not enough." There was nothing left to say after that. We finished our coffee in silence, made a plan for me to start moving my things out over the next 2 weeks, and said goodbye in the parking lot. No hug, no final words of comfort, just a sad wave, and then we walked to our separate cars. I sat in my car for a long time afterward, not ready to drive, not ready to move forward into this new reality where Marcus wasn't my person anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. How did it go? It went, I texted back, I'm moving out. Come over, I made soup. Rachel's soup couldn't fix my broken heart, but it was something. A small kindness in a world that suddenly felt very cold and uncertain. Moving out was brutal. Every box I packed felt like excavating a grave, each item a relic of a life I'd thought would last. I found concert tickets from our first date tucked into a book, a postcard he'd sent me from a business trip, a ridiculous stuffed sloth he'd won for me at a carnival, hundreds of little artifacts of our relationship, each one a small knife to the heart. Marcus helped at first, but the awkwardness of being around each other was too much. We arranged for me to pack while he was at work, and Rachel enlisted a small army of friends to help me move. By the end of the second week, I'd relocated all my possessions to Rachel and David's guest room, which now looked like a storage unit. The first night in their house, I lay in an unfamiliar bed in an unfamiliar room and felt the full weight of my displacement. I was 31 years old, starting over, living in someone else's guest room like a college student who couldn't get their life together. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. But slowly, painfully, life continued. I went back to work and threw myself into projects. I looked at apartments and eventually found a tiny studio that I could afford on my own. It was a significant downgrade from the spacious two-bedroom I'd shared with Marcus, but it was mine. I signed the lease with shaking hands, feeling simultaneously proud and terrified. My friends continued to support me, organizing distractions and outings and dinners. But they had their own lives to return to, their own partners and problems and joys. Eventually, I had to learn to sit with my own company again, to be alone without feeling lonely. One night, about 6 weeks after the breakup, I was in my new studio apartment, finally moved in, boxes mostly unpacked, when my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello. Jenna, it's Carrie, Marcus's sister. I was surprised into silence for a moment. Carrie and I had been friendly, had shared holidays and family dinners, but we'd never been close enough for her to call me out of the blue. Hi Carrie, I said carefully, what's up? I hope it's okay that I'm calling, she said. I got your number from Marcus's phone when he wasn't looking. I wanted to check on you, to tell you I think he's an idiot. Despite everything, I laughed. Thanks, that's actually really nice to hear. He called me a few weeks ago, Carrie continued. Told me what happened. I was so mad at him, Jenna. I told him he was throwing away the best thing that ever happened to him. What did he say? I asked, unable to help myself. He said he knew that, Carrie said. He said that's what made it so hard, that he wanted to feel what he knew he should feel, but he couldn't force it. And then he said the thing that really pissed me off. What? He said maybe he's just not cut out for long-term relationships, that maybe he's one of those people who's meant to be alone. Carrie's voice was thick with frustration. Can you believe that? Like it's some noble thing to just give up on human connection instead of doing the work to figure out why he keeps running away when things get real. Her words echoed what Marcus had said about therapy, about recognizing his patterns, but hearing it from his sister gave it a different weight. Do you think that's true? I asked. That some people just aren't meant for long-term relationships? I think that's a cop-out, Carrie said bluntly. I think people say that when they're afraid, and my brother is scared of a lot of things he won't admit to himself. We talked for a while longer. Carrie shared stories from Marcus's past relationships, patterns I hadn't known about. The girlfriend in college he'd pulled away from when she started talking about moving in together. The woman after that who he'd broken up with right before meeting her parents. And then me, the longest relationship he'd ever had, ended right when we started talking about houses and deeper commitment. I'm telling you this not to make excuses for him, Carrie said. But so you know this really isn't about you, it's his stuff, his fear, his inability to handle intimacy when it gets too real. You didn't do anything wrong, Jenna. After we hung up, I sat with what she'd told me. It helped in a way to see the pattern, to understand that I was just the latest casualty in Marcus's war with his own commitment issues. But it also made me angry. If he knew he had these problems, why hadn't he worked on them earlier? Why had he let me fall in love with him, let me plan a future with him, when some part of him knew he'd probably run away eventually? 3 months after the breakup, I was finally starting to feel like maybe I'd survive this. The crying had tapered off. I could go whole hours without thinking about Marcus. I'd redecorated my studio in colors he would have hated, and instead of making me sad, it made me feel defiant and free. I was having coffee with Rachel when I saw them. Marcus and a woman I didn't recognize walking down the street together. They weren't touching, but there was something about their body language, the way they leaned toward each other, that made my stomach clench. "Don't look," Rachel said, noticing my stare. "Don't do this to yourself." But I couldn't look away. As I watched, the woman said something that made Marcus laugh, that deep, genuine laugh I'd always loved. Then she playfully shoved his shoulder and he caught her hand and held it for just a moment. "He said there wasn't anyone else," I said numbly. "Maybe there wasn't then," Rachel said carefully. 3 months is enough time for." "He said he wasn't ready for a relationship," I interrupted. "He said his feelings for me changed and he needed to work on himself, and now he's holding some woman's hand 3 months later." Rachel didn't have an answer for that. We watched them disappear around a corner and I felt something shift inside me. The grief I'd been carrying began to crystallize into anger. That night I did something I'd resisted for 3 months. I went through Marcus's social media. I'd blocked him on most platforms right after the breakup, but I created a fake account to look at his Instagram. There she was, tagged in a photo from 2 weeks ago, at Sarah J. Chen. Her profile was public and I fell down the rabbit hole searching for clues. There were no photos of them together, nothing definitively romantic. But there were comments from Marcus on her posts, likes on his. And when I went back through her timeline, I found photos from events we'd attended together. That art gallery opening 4 months ago, the concert 6 months back. They'd known each other for at least 6 months, since right around when Marcus said his feelings for me started to change. I felt sick. I texted Marcus, breaking my self-imposed no-contact rule. "Who is Sarah?" He responded within minutes. "What?" "Sarah Chen, I saw you with her today." "How long have you been seeing her?" The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, "Can we talk in person?" "Just answer the question." "It's not what you think. I met her at work. We're friends. We only started spending time together socially a few weeks ago." "Did you know her when we were together?" Another long pause. "Yes, but nothing happened until after we broke up, I swear." But the timeline didn't add up. He'd known her for months, had been following her on social media, had gone to events where she was present. Even if nothing physical had happened, had he been emotionally involved with her while telling me he was trying to figure out his feelings? "I don't believe you," I texted back. "I don't think I ever really knew you at all." I blocked his number before he could respond. Rachel came over that night after I called her crying. "I knew it," I kept saying. "I knew there had to be someone else." "Even if there was," Rachel said carefully, "it doesn't change what you need to do now, which is move forward." "How am I supposed to move forward when I don't even know what was real?" I demanded. Was any of it real, or was I just a placeholder until someone better came along? "You're spiraling," Rachel said gently. "I get it, and you have every right to be angry, but making yourself crazy trying to figure out the exact timeline of his bullshit isn't going to help you heal." She was right, but I couldn't stop myself. I spent the next few days obsessively checking Sarah's social media, looking for evidence, trying to piece together the story. Had they overlapped? Had Marcus been emotionally cheating even if nothing physical happened? Did it matter? Finally, I did something impulsive. I messaged Sarah. "Hi, I'm Marcus's ex-girlfriend. I don't want to make this weird, but I saw you two together and I need to know, how long have you been dating?" She responded surprisingly quickly. "Oh God, I'm so sorry, I didn't know he had an ex. He told me he's been single for a while. We met through work about 5 months ago and started dating a month ago. I had no idea about you." 5 months ago? Right when Marcus said his feelings started changing. And if Sarah was telling the truth and I had no reason to think she wasn't, then Marcus had lied to both of us. I showed the message to Rachel. "I need you to stop me from doing something stupid," I said. "Like what?" "Like showing up at his apartment and confronting him about this." Rachel took my phone away. "You're not going to do that. You know why? Because it doesn't matter. Whatever he did or didn't do with Sarah, whether he overlapped or waited 5 minutes after your breakup or whatever, it doesn't change the fundamental truth. He ended things with you. You don't need to prove he's an asshole. You just need to let him go." "But I was right," I said. "I asked him if there was someone else and he said no. He looked me in the eyes and lied." "And that sucks," Rachel agreed. "It's a shitty thing to do, but you already knew he was capable of shitty behavior. He hid his feelings from you for 6 months, Jenna. This is just more of the same." I wanted to argue, but I was so tired. Tired of being angry, tired of crying, tired of giving Marcus so much space in my head when he clearly had moved on with his life. How do I stop caring? I asked. How do I just let go? You already are, Rachel said. It's just not a light switch, it's a process, and every day you choose to focus on yourself instead of him, you're getting closer. 6 months after Marcus looked me in the eyes and told me he no longer felt romantic love, I ran into him at a mutual friend's wedding. I debated not going, but I refused to let him take any more from me than he already had. He was there with Sarah. They looked comfortable together, at ease in that way new couples do when everything is still exciting and unshadowed by history or hurt. He saw me across the room and his face went pale. Sarah noticed and followed his gaze, her expression shifting to understanding. She said something to him and then, to my surprise, left him standing alone and walked over to me. "Hi, Jenna," she said. "I'm Sarah. I know this is weird, but I wanted to say hi and also, I wanted to apologize." I was taken aback. For what? "For believing him when he said he'd been single for a while," she said. "After you messaged me, I confronted him about the timeline. He admitted that his feelings for me started while you two were still together, and that's part of why he ended things with you. I almost broke up with him over it." "Why didn't you?" I asked, genuinely curious. She looked uncomfortable. "Honestly, because I had feelings for him too, and I wanted to believe that sometimes things just don't work out and new things begin and it's all just timing. But I've been thinking about it a lot, and I wonder if I'm just telling myself a story that makes me feel better about how this started." I looked at her, really looked at her. She seemed sincere, troubled even. "Do you love him?" I asked. "I think so," she said. "But I also wonder if I'm next on the list of women he'll decide he's no longer in love with." "Probably," I said, and I wasn't trying to be cruel. "If his sister is right, it's a pattern. He gets close to someone and then panics and runs away." Sarah nodded slowly. "His sister told me the same thing. She called me a few weeks ago." We stood there in uncomfortable solidarity, two women entangled with the same complicated man. Then Sarah said something that surprised me. "For what it's worth, he talks about you a lot, about how great you were, how patient and understanding, how he wishes he could have been the person you deserved. I don't think he's over you. I think he's just good at compartmentalizing and moving forward even when he shouldn't." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, see, he does still care, but the larger part of me recognized it didn't matter. Even if Marcus regretted his decision, even if he mourned what we'd had, it didn't change the fact that he'd chosen to leave. He decided his uncertain feelings were more important than our relationship, and I had to live with that decision. "I hope it works out for you," I told Sarah, and I meant it. "But protect yourself, okay? Don't lose yourself trying to be enough for someone who might not be capable of recognizing when he has something good." She nodded, eyes glistening with tears. "Thank you," she said quietly, and then she walked back to Marcus. I watched them for a moment, him leaning down to hear what she was saying, her gesturing back toward me, his face a mask of guilt and regret. Then I turned away. It wasn't my story anymore. Later that night, as I danced with friends and celebrated a couple whose love looked sturdy and real, I realized something. I was going to be okay. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. The pain that had been so sharp and all-consuming had dulled to a manageable ache. I could talk about Marcus without crying. I could imagine a future that didn't include him. And most importantly, I'd learned something about myself. I was capable of surviving heartbreak. I was capable of starting over. I was capable of holding on to my dignity and self-worth even when someone I loved deeply couldn't see my value. Marcus had looked me in the eyes and said he no longer felt romantic love. And for a long time, that had felt like a verdict on my worth, on my lovability. But I was beginning to understand that his inability to sustain love said more about him than it did about me. I deserved someone who would choose me, not just in the easy beginning but in the complicated middle and the uncertain future. Someone who, when feelings got difficult or confusing, would talk to me about it instead of making unilateral decisions in secret for 6 months. Someone who would see commitment as a promise to work through hard things together, not as a trap to escape from. Marcus wasn't that person. Maybe he'd never be that person for anyone, or maybe Sarah would be different somehow, would unlock some part of him I couldn't reach. Either way, it wasn't my concern anymore. As I left the wedding that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. Not for Marcus, not for some reconciliation or closure that would never fully come, but hope for myself, for the life I was building brick by brick in the ruins of what we'd had together. I was 21 years old, living in a studio apartment that was entirely mine, surrounded by friends who loved me, doing work I cared about. I was learning to be alone without being lonely. I was discovering parts of myself I'd lost or suppressed during our relationship. I was, slowly and painfully, becoming whole again. The morning after the wedding, I woke up in my apartment and made coffee in my kitchen. The Portland table sat against one wall, its worn surface catching the morning light. I ran my hand over it, feeling the history in every scratch and stain. I'd kept the table, kept the character, kept the evidence of a life lived. And I was doing the same with myself, keeping the scars and the lessons, the love I'd felt and the pain it had caused, all of it woven into who I was becoming. Marcus had looked me in the eyes and said he no longer felt romantic love. And I had looked back at him and eventually said, okay, okay, this is over, okay, I'm going to hurt for a while, okay, I'm going to survive this. Okay, I'm going to be okay. And I was.